Metabase and metrics. It sounds quite close to each other. Metabase, metrics. Maybe there's a connection. We will see. If you would ask me now if there have been metrics 5 or 6 years ago when I was working with Metabase, I would say there were no metrics. But most likely there were metrics, but I just ignored them. I had a complicated relationship with metrics at that point of time, which I will not go into. Today, I love metrics. I love to work with them. I really love them as a essential building block of all different kind of analytics setup that I'm building, because they're great. They are basically the representation of how we see our business and how it does connect to the data that we actually have and that we model, that we collect, and that we prepare for everything. Therefore, I can really use them as my building block to build out all the different kind of insights that I want to share. They are also a nice governance tool. When I define my metrics in a BI tool and make it available to everyone else who's using the kind of tool, I can be sure that they use the right kind of metric definitions, which can avoid the situations like, why does your revenue look so weird to me? Because, I just calculated it myself. And so, okay, but actually we are calculating it like this. A clear definition of metrics is super essential because it makes insights comparable, it makes dashboards comparable, and it also defines how your business is working. For now, over 1.5 years, I'm working a lot with metric trees, and I will show you one in a second that we will use here for this example. And especially with the metric tree, where you have a relational model of all the metrics to each other, and you can basically show, okay, here we have the output. Or maybe let me show you. It doesn't make sense to just talk about something and you have no idea what I'm talking about. So this is the metric tree. And so we have this nice output, our output metric, which in our case, like here for the business scenario, what we have here is total monthly recurring revenue. It's usually some kind of revenue as an output metric. It can also be profit margins if you have another branch that is covering the costs. However you build this stuff, but usually you have something like revenue out here. The big problem with that is that you cannot walk into a room and say, hey, we have to make more revenue. First of all, everyone will say, yeah, guess what? A big surprise. But the other thing, obviously, is you cannot influence revenue directly. The nice thing about the metric tree is we are basically breaking down everything. Here you can see, for example, this is the acquisition part. And so that at some point we get to a level where we can actually influence things. Session started, for example, is something that marketing can definitely influence. They can just run marketing campaigns and get people to our website. This will start a session. This is a metric that I can really influence. I have to see how well I can influence it, but for this, I have this relational model here where I can say, okay, let's see if we push this metric up, how does it trickle down the long way until we generate some new MRR? And then how long do we stick with them? This is what makes this metric system really powerful. This brought back my love to metrics again. Today, I want to check how can I work with metrics in Metabase. Is it a central piece? Is it more like an adjacent piece? How does it work? This is what we will do. I checked out the documentation already, and it just has one page in the documentation. It's not a clear sign that it's a building block important feature. I tested a little bit yesterday, and I think it's a useful feature, but it's not like a centerpiece. I like to have metrics as a centerpiece, but I think if you use it properly, it can be a useful setup in your Metabase setup. Let's get working. Okay, so I still have my same Metabase setup. If you watched my video about onboarding on Metabase, we are here. We have onboarded, so we have connected a BigQuery to it, and so we can get started working. What I want to create first is I want to create a daily check-in dashboard, when I want to do it in a way that I define the metrics beforehand. Well, let's have a quick look what we actually want to build here. I have to quickly zoom out again, and then let me go down. These are the different kind of metrics and dimensions that I was thinking about. And so right now, we really look into the metrics. We need something about total MRR, new MRR, total MRR, new MRR, churned MRR, retention rate, which is already quite good because like this, maybe not the retention rate. Maybe let's say we don't need the retention rate. We retained MRR. We're interested in that. And then potentially we also have paused MRR. Let me extend this. For example, we have a good example where a metric definition definitely makes sense because all this calculates the total MRR. I'm not even sure if I calculate the total MRR in my DVT model. I don't think so. This, for example, is a good place, or it can be a good place to do in a BI tool. This is a different video to think about, okay, where should I define my metrics? I have the tendency to define them in the data model already, at least for all the absolute numbers. Relational metrics obviously is hard to define at that kind of level because we mix up everything here with the dimensions and therefore we have to recalculate everything. And so it's possible to do it in a data model, but it requires a lot more effort and permutation to do that. Therefore, I like to, for example, I would most likely define total MRR in my DBT model, maybe not in my BI tool, but here it's a good exercise to see what we can do. Okay, so let's define some metrics. We have metrics here. I played around with some metrics yesterday. You can see this here. But I will start to create some from scratch again. And how you can do this, so you have the global new button that can create anything new and also a metric. I can pick which kind of table or model I want to use. I haven't created any kind of models. I'm working here mostly with one big table schema for connecting to the BI system. Therefore, model is not so much needed for me. I don't really have to make sure how I can join different kind of tables because all these tables are single representation of metrics and dimensions. Therefore, I don't have to look into models, but let me look into the tables. Just thinking about, so this is one tricky thing. I have different, this is the tricky thing with OBTs. So they are usually like a representation of a specific kind of use case. When I have them here as well, so I have some with core metrics, I have some with more product-focused metrics, and I have some with marketing-focused metrics. So the big question is like, where do I actually pick my values from? And I have to remember how I have modeled the data. For example, where do I have all the subscription metrics? I think I have all the subscription metrics in here. Let's have a look. We have the data, so I can change it. And here I can create the formula for the metric. For example, first we want to have new MRR. So this would be a sum of new MRR. This is already in here. And then I have to pick default time dimension. I just have one time dimension in this table. I don't really know why I have to define the granularity here. Technically, the data is on a day, but I don't know what kind of impact this has. And it doesn't have a toggle here. I can preview. What does preview mean? Okay, it calculates. Okay, I can preview the data. Maybe, yeah, there might be a case where this is helpful. Okay, so that's it. Then I can visualize everything. Okay, yeah, looks quite all right, I would say. It's a simple formula that we just did, so we might do more complicated along the way. So let me save that. Okay, and this is new MRR. And we can save it. Cool, now we have new MRR, so we can do the next one. So I'm just quickly creating the different MRR ones, because then we can calculate the total MRR. And this is the final one, churned MRR. And with this, I basically have all the basic MRRs ready. Now, for example, we can calculate the total MRR. For example, I can now build everything based on the metrics as well. This is quite nice. I have defined metrics. Now I can reuse the metrics to build another metric. This is what I really like. If you really can start to stack up metrics, because like then you can build on foundation. Let's do this. We have new MRR, but yeah, so we need a formula here. It's good. We are immediately going into custom expression because now we're starting to extend this. What we will do is, so we also have retained MRR. Okay, this is a bit tricky because I have the table, and the table it has the same name, so it has retained MRR. But it's nice that here with the hash in front of it, it's coming from the database, and like with the star, it's a metric. I learned this along the way. We have this, then we do minus paused and minus churned. Okay, and this gives us total MRR. Nice. Let me see if this makes sense. Okay, we get a because we didn't have picked a time dimension. That makes sense. Okay, good. Oh my God. On a daily basis, we even lost money. Well, it looks good. This definitely looks good. If something goes beyond 0, it looks like, okay, this looks solid. Hopefully solid for the business. But this is something we can then create in the daily check-in dashboard. Okay, so we created this kind of metrics. One thing that I discovered yesterday, which I think is important to know when you work with metrics, is the case you have to be very careful what you use as your data source. Just let me quickly show you this. When I was working yesterday, for example, I wanted to calculate this conversion rate, session to survey step 1. I have this virtual data set where people can come to the website and then they check out the product, and then at some point they start the checkout, and the checkout is actually a survey. They have to go 3-4 steps through the survey. And so I wanted to see what is the conversion rate from actually people starting a session and then going into the survey. I wanted to calculate this metric. Let's have a quick look how it looks like. Okay, this is the output of the metrics. Okay, this is the conversion rate. It's not a really good one, but yeah, there's room for improvement definitely there. And I calculated in that, how did I do this? This is not the metric definition, I think. Yeah, but I want to see the metric. Okay, that's interesting that I cannot. Let me see. I wanted to see how I build this metric. And when I look here, I can't actually see it anymore how I have constructed it. That is interesting, because I would now expect that I see the formula, how I have created it, and I didn't do any of these. Interesting. But okay, I wanted to show you something else, one problem that I ran into. Let's construct it again. I want to create a metric, and so I will pick the core metrics here. This is how I got started. What I wanted to do is I wanted to calculate a conversion rate. To calculate a conversion rate, I need, let's say, the totals of all sessions started, and I need the totals or the sum of all users who then submitted the first survey step. Let's say I'm interested in, let's calculate the sessions first. What I want to do here is, so I want to have a custom expression, because this is something what I want to calculate. And yeah, so here we have a number of sessions. Next thing that I'm interested in is I want to have the number of people who submitted the first survey step. And when I go in here, I can do sum again. Yep, this into this. And then here I can look for survey, but I don't find it. The interesting thing that I discovered yesterday is it's not a big surprise. My source data set obviously defines what I can calculate in the formula. If I don't have all the metrics that I need, and also I defined this metric before, so I defined survey step submitted, I defined it before, but it used a different data set. And then I defined session started, and it used also a different data set. Then I picked the data set for the session started, and I wanted to get the survey, and it was not there. Which is not a big surprise, because we cannot just drop in any kind of data set here. The data sets have to have some kind of relationship. One way to get around it is like to build a model first. Model, I could say, hey, take these 2 data sets, bring it together by this kind of rules. And with this, you can then use the model as your data source, and then you can build the different kind of metrics. I think this is not a big blocker, but it's something to keep in mind, especially like when yesterday, at least for 5 minutes, I was like, okay, why don't I see this stuff? And I recognized, yeah, sure, I haven't defined it in here, and I cannot cross-reference, because this would create chaos if I would do. This is always a bit a tricky part when you work also like with metrics, but in general, also like when you work in a BI tool, how you prepare the data that goes into the BI tool. I could have a star schema. I don't use a star schema here. I could use a star schema, and then I can create a model in Metabase to represent the star schema, to tell, okay, how do we actually join the different kind of fact tables with dimensional tables? With this, it would take away the problem that I have right here. Then I would potentially just have one model that represents all the data that I have, and from there I can build all the different kind of metrics and combine them. I took the different approach to build one big tables. One big tables are basically pre-aggregated metrics and dimensions in one table. And therefore, I really have to make sure that I have all the metrics that I want to use to calculate another metric in one table. Here, in my case, if I want to create the conversion rate, so this was something that I had to fix yesterday. To go into the data model, I had to extend one OBT that it includes all the metrics. Let's say technically I had to include the sessions into the OBT model, so then I could use it. Then I had, this is like why I then had session started product, because it came from the product table. Not nice. If it would be my real life setup, I would most likely would have went back and defined it in a nicer way. But it's just one thing that you have to really keep in mind. The data model has to support all the combination of different kind of metrics that you want to create if you want to use it here as a data source. Again, you can invest some time. The interesting thing is, I don't want to go too deep into this because it would be an own video. BI tools still love star schema. I was starting to prepare this, but I personally don't really, especially I have a data model that has quite a lot of behavioral data in there. And behavioral data in a star schema is a bit tricky because behavioral data can be huge. I have a small test data set here, but I worked on cases like with Google Analytics 4 data when, for example, we pick something like session started. And so you can have 200 million sessions, I don't know, in a week or so, if you really, let's say, quite a big traffic website. This creates you a fact table of 200 million rows for specific things. It brings some effort to the BI tool and also to work with this data set. This is why I like to work with OBTs, which are pre-aggregated metrics and dimension sets, which then takes away the vast amount of single rows. But again, it comes down how your data looks like, and it's not a video about data modeling. The only thing what I want to make sure that you understand is when you define metrics, you have to have the metrics in the data source that you define here. Keep this in mind. But why is it now nice that we have metrics? Just maybe let's start on a first question that I also need for the daily check-in dashboard. For example, I can start with a metric. Now for example, we have defined new MRR, so I can pick new MRR. I have it here. Then I can pick the next ones. The metrics are always present here, and I can always pick them from there. When I create my tutorials for the other people who will work with Metabase, I can always point them to say, hey, your first pick should always be from the metrics, and the second pick should be then you do other stuff. So I would teach them like, hey, look, you can go here into the metrics. They are already defined, so you don't really have to think about what you have to use here. Count, sum, blah, blah, blah. Let's say, in a nice world that I like, I would have metrics as the first item here in the list and not as the second one. I would say, hey, metrics, this is predefined. This is the plug-and-play version. Pick this first. If you really want to construct something, yeah, you can maybe try some basic functions. And if you want to go crazy, you can go for custom expression. That would be more logical for me. But okay, it's fine. I think this is something that you can at least easily teach people. Now I can pick everything from here that I already defined before. Let me see that we have all of them here. Churned and total. Okay, maybe not per day. Let me give this on a week. And then I can start to visualize it. And you can see this is a really nice shortcut. It's not a nice chart. It's too much noise. Definitely, let's say, for the dashboard, I have to clean it up, which I will do in the next video. But it's nice. You could see it. It's super easy to, let's say, to quickly start to build all these things. One thing that I'm wondering is like why it doesn't really take the name of the metric that I gave it here as this. So for total MRR, it did because I could define it in a different place. Maybe I'm just missing a definition here at some point, but this could be something that I would investigate. But like this shows you the benefit of starting out with metrics is a nice governance tool. It's a shortcut. It's basically you create a template. You can say, hey, I created a template for all the different kind of analysis that we all might do and just pick these. If this doesn't fit, you can fiddle around with some custom definitions, but pick the predefined metrics. I think like when you're on a higher plan, you can then also have verified metrics so that you have this verification label where you can verify metrics or dashboards or other things where let's say the data team can say, hey, we actually have created it or we have verified it. It's good. You can use it. This gives you a really good layer to governance. Okay, this is how you can work with metrics in Metabase. As I said, it's an additional feature. It's not a core feature, at least this is how it feels for me, but it's still fine. It's there, I can use it. Then it's up to me how I teach this to the other people who are working with this kind of setup. Okay, I hope this was helpful. If it was, like the video, subscribe to the channel because there are more videos coming up. For example, in the next one, I will build the daily check-in dashboard.